The Obsolete Man. Twilight Zone Season 2. Episode 29. Before Rod Serling ever ushers us into the chamber, we already know what's on trial here. It isn't just a man. It isn't just a profession. It isn't even just God or books or knowledge. What's really being dragged before the tribunal is the question of meaning itself. Can truth be outlawed? Can the eternal be edited? Can the mind that God created declare itself unnecessary? This is the stage of the obsolete man. A stark room, a tribunal robed in false authority, and a single librarian who stands for everything the state says is gone. His crime? To believe in words, in ideas, in a God beyond decree. But the deeper crime, the one the ego fears most, is simply this: to exist as mind, unbroken, unyielding, unerasable. It is here that the trial begins, and here that Serling's words strike their first blow. The ego declared truth obsolete, and proved its own non-existence. You walk into this room at your own risk because it leads to the future. Not a future that will be, but one that might be. This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one. It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time. It has refinements, technological advances, and more sophisticated approaches to the destruction of human freedom. But like every one of the superstates that preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is an enemy and truth is a menace. That's Rod Serling's voice, but it's also the ego's voice. The ego lives by inversion, and so it calls reason its enemy and truth its greatest threat. It pretends that rational principles, logos, can be twisted to enforce its dream of separation. But even logic, when purified of distortion, must lead back to truth, which is why the state insists logic is the enemy, truth the menace. Enter Mr. Romney Wordsworth. The name says it all. Wordsworth. The worth of words. The value of thought. He's a librarian, keeper of the books, dealer in ideas, steward of memory. And that alone makes him a threat to a system built on erasure. They call him obsolete, but what is obsolescence? It's the ego's declaration that meaning has no function, that truth is outdated, that God is no longer needed. But here's the paradox. If God doesn't exist, who exactly is left to declare it? What mind sits in judgment? What authority proclaims the edict? It collapses under its own weight. The state says, no books, no God, no ministers, no words. But Wordsworth persists. I am a human being, he insists. I have a mind. That's the core of this episode, the irreducible reality of mind. Not body, not books, not function in form, but mind itself. The tribunal mocks him, dehumanizes him, calls him a bug. Yet every insult they hurl only exposes their fear. For if one obsolete librarian can speak a single thought aloud, and that thought lives, then the lie of the state is already undone. Ideas leave not their source. Truth remains. And so the sentence is passed. Wordsworth has 48 hours to live, free to choose the time and manner of his death. And what does he choose? To die with dignity. To die with the Bible in his hand. To die with the cameras rolling so the whole state can see. And most brilliantly, he chooses to lock the Chancellor in the room with him. The one who declared him obsolete must now share his fate. Here the ego is forced to face itself. The hunter becomes the hunted. The executioner is trapped in his own execution. As Wordsworth reads Psalm 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The Chancellor trembles. Notice the subtlety. Wordsworth does not try to prove God. He simply invokes him. He rests in him. And that resting terrifies the ego, because the ego knows that calm trust is the one thing it cannot counterfeit. It can counterfeit logic. It can counterfeit religion. It can counterfeit morality. But it cannot counterfeit peace. So the Chancellor breaks. He begs for release in the name of the very God he denied. And Wordsworth, with serene authority, hands him the key. The Chancellor escapes. But his escape is his undoing. For the people have seen him plead. They've seen him invoke the God the state said did not exist. They've seen fear in the face of their supposed strength. And so the Chancellor is declared obsolete, dragged down by the very tribunal he once presided over. This is the mirror turned on the ego. It will always devour itself. The false authority that claims to erase truth is itself erased, and Serling drives the point home in the closing narration. The Chancellor was obsolete. The state was obsolete. Any entity that denies the dignity of man, that denies the reality of mind, that denies the eternal, is obsolete. What makes the obsolete man a sleeper masterpiece is this double reversal. First, Wordsworth exposes the lie of the state by refusing to accept its terms. Second, the state exposes itself by consuming its own chancellor. The ego always promises safety, but delivers sacrifice. Always declares others obsolete, only to find its own verdict waiting. And what about death, the so-called great equalizer? The Chancellor shuddered before it. Wordsworth sat in peace before it. But the course tells us even death itself is not real. The true equalizer is not death. It is life. One shared life. One shared mind. In that awareness, nothing is obsolete, because nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. That's why Wordsworth wins. Not because he outsmarts the Chancellor, not because he dies a martyr, but because he never was what the state declared him to be. Obsolete was only the ego's projection. The Son of God cannot be obsolete. Not in time, not in eternity. And so the Twilight Zone leaves us with this verdict. When truth is denied, the denier is what disappears, never the truth itself.